Uber and Lyft drivers, what's your most NSFW story? Story 1. Not really NSFW, but unexpected. I'm a bald white male. I was driving in the Detroit area. No, it's not as sketchy as you think. Anyway, an older white guy gets in the car and immediately starts talking politics. This was pre-election. He goes on about Trump for a minute and then says, "Boy, N-words are really ruining this country, eh?" I guess because we're both white, we're both ignorant? I don't know. He gave me 3 stars because I disagreed. I also once glanced in my rearview mirror in time to catch a very large female passenger pulling her hand out of her leggings and sniffing it with great relish. Story 2. My 2 stories would have to be a lady who was kinda drunk and kept asking me questions and moaning slightly every now and then. When she got out of the car, I checked the back seat and there was a Sharpie. A sticky Sharpie that was obviously used for something. The other was 2 strippers that had a long ride and kept daring each other to flash me, gave me a back rub, suck my earlobe, and that progressively got to the point where one dared the other to hook up with me when we got to their house. Edit, yes, I hooked up with the redheaded stripper. I had recently broken up with my girlfriend and it was a real ego boost to feel wanted like that by someone. I thought it was implied. Sorry for leaving you hanging. Story 3. Not a driver, but I was having a smoke out front of my apartment when an Uber pulled up with a girl in the back seat. A neighbor from down the hall I recognized, who was screaming at the driver and refusing to get out of the vehicle. It sounded like she didn't want to pay him for the ride and was demanding her cash back, which didn't make any sense to me because Uber isn't a cash service. When she started hitting him, I phoned the police. 15 minutes later, they showed up and she still hasn't left his vehicle. The cops drag her out and arrest her. Turns out she gave the driver a blowy on the way and thought that would get her a free fare. And she was more than a little upset when she still had to pay. Girl never looked me in the eyes again when we passed the hall. Story 4. This is probably the funniest ride I've had. Picked up a group of 3 guys and a girl from a pretty well-known gay bar. When they walk up to my car, 2 hop in the back first, and then the other girl and guy can't decide where they want to sit, front or back. Well, she basically tells the guy to behave, and she sits in the back seat. Well, we get to driving. I notice this guy is covered in glitter, and I guess the kind of guy you would call a bear. Like he's a bigger guy with a beard, and makes a comment on how I'm cuter than the first Uber they ordered. The girl starts to agree. I guess this reminds him of the guy he left at the club and starts talking about the most perfect Canadian dong he's ever seen. His friends tell him to call him, and he gets upset, stating that it'll never happen. They fight, yelling back and forth. All the while, he complains he missed this dong. Switched the dong's nationality from Canadian to Australian a couple times too. I guess I never really heard a thirsty gay guy before. Story 5. This isn't NSFW in the traditional lewd sense, but one time I picked up a guy who seemed to be in a horrible mood and kept urging me to drive faster, telling me he doesn't care if I speed or pass people, etc. He was clutching a small bag to his chest and staring ahead angrily. It was almost an hour drive to the middle of nowhere, but thankfully he had a phone call right after he got into the car to distract him as I flew down the highway. Naturally, I listened to his conversation. Driving gets boring after all, and it was something about his ex-wife, his car had been repossessed, etc. And it seemed like he was talking to a lawyer or something, didn't seem like a friend. After a while, he hangs up the phone and looks out the window in a huff. And then explains to me that his ex-wife had gotten his truck repoed because he was apparently 1 day late on his payment, and his car had his money, PTSD meds, etc. I tried to reassure him as much as possible and tone down the conversation, but he was, understandably, very angry. He then started ranting about the repo guys, who were just outside county lines, hence the long drive, and how he wanted to shoot up the place. Understanding now why he was clutching the bag, this made me a little nervous, and thankfully I was able to lighten the mood a bit, and hopefully convince him to not go on a shooting spree. He then rants about his ex-wife and kids, and says that he wants to put a bullet in her head, and that of her lawyer. And I remember saying something like this will only make your problems worse, and he says that it doesn't matter since he's off his PTSD meds, so is insane. We're like 15 minutes off from his destination by now, and I really have no idea what to do besides try to identify with this guy while talking him down and being understanding. I end the ride and offer to go in with him to the repo place if he needs a hand getting his truck, and he agrees. We get his truck, and the people had stolen all of his cash, but not his meds, thankfully, and he was holding back tears. It was a very surreal experience. Also, bachelorette parties can be annoying, since women in that state think it's totally okay to grope me, which is great and all, but I'm trying not to die in a fiery car crash. Also, one group stole my hat, which is unforgivable, since that particular hat no longer exists. Story 6. Former cabbie here. Picked up a couple from a bar/restaurant and they were going to a friend's party. They didn't seem that plastered, but about halfway into the 20-minute ride, I hear telltale signs of some finger blasting in the back seat. Whatever, it happens on the sly every so often, and I figure people like the idea that they're being slick in public, so I let it go. Well, eventually it sounds like she's got her hands in his pants and then straight up just starts straddling him. They go at it hard for about 5 minutes and then we get to the drop off. I say something like, as long as you guys didn't make a mess back there, we're all good. Dude looks horrified, like he's thinking, oh my god, did he notice my GF just banged my brains out? Yes, bro. You guys were the opposite of subtle. Girl is blushing and as red as her lipstick. Now, I'm just laughing to myself because they actually thought they were being stealthy. It was a $15 fare, and the guy hands me $40 and says, hey man, thanks for being cool about it. Easy money and a good story to tell. Worth it. Story 7. I've done about 1,400 rides for Uber and about 500 for Lyft in the past 8 months. I've had a few good stories, and only 2 pukers so far. That's probably the most unpleasant part of my job. As far as NSFW, that would have to be the 2 women passengers in the back seat. One was pretty sober and the other was very much so not. The drunk girl, who sounded like she eats cigarettes, decided she wanted to demonstrate what her orgasm sounded like, complete with writhing around in the back seat. Now, my car is not very big to begin with. Me and the sober girl thought it was pretty funny, and even though it was a short trip, we were given a pretty convincing performance. Story 8. I drive for Lyft, and this happened the weekend of St. Paddy's Day. I was out doing my rounds, and that night was pretty crazy due to St. Patrick's Day, the moon was full, and during SXSW. I had a full car of people. This was a Lyft line, so it was a pair of 2 people, a couple composed of a guy and a girl, and 2 girlfriends out and about for the night. We stopped at a red light and waited for it to turn green, when suddenly a line of women were walking in front of my car across the crosswalk. Well, the leader of the line decided to take her top off, bra and all. The remaining 5 women followed along and removed their tops as well. Me and the girlfriend from the couple just watched in awe as 6 women walk across without tops. It was a good night. I just wish I had my dash cam then. Now, I drive with one 24/7. Story 9. This happened to my cousin a few weeks ago, actually. She was getting a ride home from a friend's house somewhat late at night and made the mistake of getting in the front seat of an Uber. Her driver was this middle-aged guy who would not stop giving her weird compliments and telling her how her boyfriend is so lucky. He even tried touching her leg and hair, and it was just super weird. So my cousin gets home and contacts Uber about this driver, and they apologize and give her a free ride. But a few days later, someone comes to their front door and won't stop knocking and saying, I'm looking for my friend. My aunt is the only one home and yells from the upstairs window for them to leave or she's calling the police. They leave after she threatens them, and later that night when she's telling my cousin about her day, she pieces together by the description of the guy that it was her creepy Uber driver. She opens up the app and found the guy's picture from her previous rides, and sure enough, the aunt confirms that it's the same dude. They contacted Uber but haven't heard back yet. They are also considering a restraining order. Story 10. Picked up a couple from the Grizzly Rose, a filthy country bar in Denver. Guy asks to pee, so I stop as he pees while leaning against the car. Guy seems to go from being quiet to angry in his verbiage and demeanor through the drive, even to the point of grabbing my seat while his partner tries to calm him at a stoplight. Hear him threaten to kill his partner. Cue the adrenaline. The threats towards the partner intensify. On the highway, I pull into the hard shoulder and gradually depress brake pedal so as to avoid any wheel lock. Exit vehicle. Guy follows me out and tries to fight me on the side of the highway. I sprint back to the car as he falls flat on his face. Drive the woman home and leave the guy on the side of the highway. Try figuring out why she's with him. Afraid her son will judge her if she leaves, despite her being the income source for the family. Classic physical and psychologically abusive stronghold. Very upsetting. I called the police immediately and reported everything, including address. Story 11. Drove Uber. I picked up a woman, pretty attractive. I see that the trip is going to take a little over an hour. You get good at reading people and gauging their willingness for small talk when you've been driving for a while. You also have a pretty good stock of questions and conversation starters based on the length of the trip. 5 to 10 minutes? How's your day? Lovely/terrible weather out today, huh? Etc. Greater than 30 minutes? So, what do you do for a living? Are you still in school? What did you/do you study? Because this was going to be a significantly longer ride, we ended up talking about our respective significant others. After about half an hour of driving, we become fairly comfortable together, which is why when her phone rang and she informed me that it was her boyfriend and to excuse her for a second while she took the call, I offered a friendly hello that was loud enough for him to hear on the other side of the phone. That was a mistake. After offering my greeting, there was a pregnant pause, followed by an audible, "Who the F was that?" from the phone. A huge fight ensued. Why the F do you not trust me at all? You're the one who cheated on me. Unintelligible response. I'm taking an expensive as F Uber to get home just to see you and take care of your unemployed ass. The fight continued on in this manner for about 5 minutes before she all but threw her phone out of the window in anger. After hanging up, she looked at me through my rearview mirror and deadpan asked, "You want to pull over and bang me?" I was not expecting this. One of the main things we had talked about was how happy we were with our respective significant others. I was extremely happy with my then girlfriend, who is now my fiancé, so I declined as delicately as possible. She didn't even seem upset by that. That didn't prevent her, however, from leaving her purse in my back seat so as to call me back 10 minutes later and requisition me again. Crazy frickin' broad. Probably would have been a spectacular lay, but I hope things are just working out well for her. Story 12. My cousin told me a story where these two MILFs called for a Lyft. Apparently they were middle-aged trophy wives that didn't get any from their husband, as he described them. They had their own car, but wanted my cousin to leave his Lyft vehicle there and have them drive their car over to their house because they had a couple drinks, and they said they were going to get him another Lyft back. Well, he agreed, and at some point, both of them offered him to bang, and he declined. He said that he regrets that one. Story 13. Not a driver, but was a passenger when an Uber driver, female in her 40s, was talking on the phone to customer service about what had happened days earlier. Apparently, she picked up 3 people in Miami Beach after Ultra Festival. One guy sits in the front, guy and girl in the back. Guy in the front starts talking to her loudly and puts on music. In the meanwhile, the back passengers start banging. She told me she couldn't even turn around because she felt kinda shocked, but she told me she heard a lot. P.S. I was sitting in the backseat at the time she was talking on her phone when I heard that the lady had not even cleaned them since. I slowly tried sitting in a corner with just one butt cheek. Story 14. I've got 2. I was working in Tucson picking up frat boys from a weekend pool party, and I pick up this guy in a banana hammock and a girl in a one-piece. They immediately get in the car and she straddles him when I pull away. Swimsuits start coming off and I hear moaning. I immediately pull over to the side of the highway and kick them out. The second one isn't so NSFW, but I picked up a woman in Denver. Initially she was very rude but wanted a ride across town, so I put up with it. She slowly started to warm up and started hinting that she wanted party favors for banging. When I told her I didn't have any, she started talking about the bugs and why there were so many all over her. Obviously, she was very high. She then resorted to begging me to come into her place for a night of drugs and banging. I adamantly refused and dropped her off. I also heard a story of my friend picking up a sorority girl who was so drunk she pooped in his back seat. Edit with a bonus story. I picked up some frat boys from Western Denver. They got in my car and I saw that the destination was a local sleazy strip club 30 miles away. I gladly obliged taking them. About 5 minutes in, one asks if he can make a quick call. From what I could gather, he called one of the strippers at the strip club and proceeded to have 30 minutes of group phone banging with her, all while the phone is on speaker. Story 15. 2 stories. 1. Was doing an unusual really late night in San Diego. There's this club called Spin that goes till about 4 a.m. In California, you have to stop serving alcohol at 2, but people can still get high and dance. That night was a hip-hop night. Thursday, if I recall correctly. A trashy girl and this guy get into my car, make me wait about 5 minutes while they were trying to convince a second girl to get in the car. Maybe they were having a threesome or something. Anyway, so it starts raining, they give up, and I start to take them to their destination. They're making out in the back, and I'm driving very carefully. It's raining cats and dogs. Rare in San Diego, and no one knows how to deal with it. And I see at least 3 drunk drivers on the streets already. About 2 miles from their exit, I see a foot by my head. I'd have kicked them out then and there, but it was the highway. And I'd have kicked them out at the exit, but their house was 1 block away. Anyway, the car was bouncing at the exit. I hadn't even banged anyone in the back of my car. Got them kicked off of Lyft for good. And second, this one time I picked up a passenger and he and his 2 buddies get in and ask me to take them to the nightclub. So I recommend one, and about 2 blocks later, the main Pax notices that he left his passport at home. He's physically lost his driver's license, so he can't get into the club without ID. So we turn around and he runs up to his apartment. I chat with his buddies, who really take a liking to me. He comes back down and sadly tells me that he's locked out of his apartment. Guy tips me $40. I try to refuse, but he insists. So I go on and take more rides. About an hour later, somehow I get pinged by him again. At this point, it's midnight on a really slow Thursday, and he and his friends say, "Screw the nightclub. Let's go to the strip club." They ask me which one is the best. I don't know from personal experience, but tell them that Pacers has the best reputation among my passengers. The guys tell me that if I haven't ever gone before, I should join them. Then the main pack says, "I'll pay for everything. It's a slow Thursday. I mean, it doesn't seem like my thing, but why not? Main Pax gets table service. All of us get drunk, gives me a stack of ones to throw at the dancers, and buys each of the guys plus me 2 lap dances. In return, I bought everyone Lyft rides home and got the Pax and the driver of the Lyft home some burritos from my favorite joint. The other 2 guys were too asleep to be able to eat. Turns out the guy was born in Mexico, moved here, maybe not legally with his parents at a young age, and enlisted in the Marines. He kept his nose real clean while in the service and had excellent service record across 2 deployments in Iraq and Afghanistan, and being bilingual basically left the service and immediately got a high 6-figure job as an executive with a construction contracting company. He has more money than he knows how to spend and still lives a humble life, so every other month or so he takes his buddies from the service out for a night on the town. Bonus not NSFW story/life pro tip. One time I was logged on early in the morning for an Uber promo and dropped off a Pax at the airport, and on the way home I started to feel really lightheaded. Threw up in my own car on the freeway. Food poisoning from the day before maybe? Thank goodness I had these vomit bags and cat-like reflexes. To this day I still take 1 vomit bag in the car. Story 16. Passengers frequently ask me for my craziest Uber experience, and this is my go-to answer. I've told this story a lot. So I get a ping at about 2 a.m. on a Saturday night. The account was in a guy's name. I pull up to the house and I'm waiting a few minutes. This was a Lyft ride, so I was able to see the destination as soon as I arrived. And I see they're going about an hour and a half away, which will make an awesome end to the night, so I'm excited. After I'm waiting for about 5 minutes, finally the door opens and I see this girl get tossed out of the house like a damn cartoon character. Remember on Fresh Prince when Uncle Phil would throw Jazz out of the house? Kinda like that. She picks herself up and is stumbling around, and then 3 tote bags of her belongings are tossed out behind her. She picks up all of her stuff and stumbles toward the car. At this point I'm concerned because it looks like a domestic violence situation. She gets in the car and is crying hysterically, and I'm nearly in a panic asking if she's okay, if she needs to go to the hospital, etc. She doesn't talk for about a minute or so. I went ahead and started driving so I could get her the hell out of there. After we got a block from the house, she starts rambling incoherently, and the first actual words she says to me were, frickin' bitch, right? I'm not on drugs. At this point, I could tell that she was very much so on drugs, and a lot of them, and is acting kind of unpredictable, and I'm worried she's gonna stab me or something. Next, she tells me before we go to her house, she has to stop somewhere else and gives me another address in town. So I update the address and we start heading there. She also says several times that she has $500 cash on her and that she'll give me a big tip when we get to her house. Which any Uber and Lyft driver knows what that means. She's sitting in the back seat, pouring the contents of these 3 giant tote bags out in my car with the dome light on, just throwing stuff everywhere. I glance back and there are at least 3 pairs of panties lying on the seat, an entire box of tampons minus the box, a hairdryer, a lot of candy, a banana, stuff like that. So she can't find her phone and she's panicking about it now. So she's sitting in the back but is now leaning forward, hovering next to me. She's completely sideways and has managed to get herself lodged from about the bottom of her ribcage up, in the 8-inch space between the 2 front seats. And she's using her one free hand to try and grab my phone out of the dock because she wants to call someone. I tell her I need my phone for navigation and to please sit down, but she doesn't give up. For about 5 minutes she keeps asking and I finally give in, which was stupid, but I just needed her to shut the hell up. So I agree to dial the number for her, but my phone is connected to my car's Bluetooth, so I told her it's not going to be a private conversation, which she said was fine. So of course she can't remember the number and we dial 2 wrong numbers from my personal phone at 2:30 in the morning first, but then she finally gets it right. And a husband and wife both answer the phone, and it's clear they immediately want nothing to do with her. She's telling them she's on her way to their apartment. She needs to pick up $50 that they apparently owe her. The call goes on for about 10 minutes, but the basic gist of their response was, "It's 2:30 in the morning, can we do this later? Don't come here, the security guard won't let you in. No, I won't meet you down the street. Go F yourself." So they hang up, then she's hanging between the seats trying to grab my phone again. I'm usually cordial even with difficult people, but I had had enough of her, so I yell at her to sit back down, which she does, but is still leaning forward on the back of my seat, almost with her chin on my shoulder, and she tells me a different address now that the first people don't want her coming there. I'll skip over a few details here, but suffice it to say, she then had me go to 3 different houses in really sketchy neighborhoods while she went and knocked on doors at 3 a.m. trying to get money from people. And in her state of mind, I'm not sure if any of them were the right house, so I'm just positive I'm getting murdered tonight. But after the 3rd house, she gets back in and wants to go to a 4th, and can't even remember the address, and is puzzled that I don't know where her friend Janet lives. And I told her I can't drive her around to random houses all night if she doesn't know the address. I'm just going to take her home. She finally agrees to just go home, at which point she rummages through the giant pile of trash on my seat and then lights up a cigarette without a word. I don't hear the lighter or realize what's happening, but I suddenly smell smoke. I turn around and see her puffing away, and having completely given up on being nice to this maniac, I yelled, "Will you effing get rid of that? You can't smoke in here!" She says she will when she's done. I stop the car and said, "Now," like I'm her dad, and she takes one more puff and throws it out the window. So then we're heading to her house finally. She had been in the car for about 45 minutes now, and we were still over an hour away from where she lived. So while it was going to be a decent fare, I was just annoyed. The next 20 minutes, she's bending my ear like we're suddenly best friends. The only thing was, she was the only one understanding the conversation, and I just had to fake my way along like I had any idea what she was saying. She was speaking English, but it was heavily slurred, partially shouted, and through some random hysterical crying fits. Most of it was completely incoherent, but the little bits I did piece together was that the house I picked her up from was her ex-boyfriend's. They were still friends, but he sucked because he caught her shooting up in the bathroom, and then she got into a fist fight with his current girlfriend. At which point, they both chucked her out of the house like a side of beef, and this little journey began. Fortunately, once we were about halfway there, she just passed out. So I turned the music down and was extremely quiet the rest of the way so I wouldn't have to deal with her again. We pull up to her house, and it takes me 5 minutes to get her to wake up. Then she's grabbing armfuls of panties, a banana, and whatever else and just dumping it all into the street rather than back into the bags, and then carries the pile up to her porch. I grabbed the one bag that was still intact and carried it for her, still hoping she might follow through on that tip, but of course I knew better. When someone tells an Uber driver they'll get a big tip, it means you're getting no tip at all. So that was pretty much it. I made sure all of her stuff was out, ended the trip, and got the hell out of there. Normally, it would have been a 1-star for her, but unfortunately, it was her ex-boyfriend's account. I hated to do it because none of this was his fault, but I had to give him a 3 just to ensure I never ended up with her again. I ended up with only about $80, which is a good take, especially with no surge, but it wasn't worth all the BS. I just wanted to go home.